Hello and welcome back. In the last section, we actually integrated the user creation API with our front end, and while it was successfully creating the user, it was also creating another problem. Okay, and that was every time the user was logged in, it was calling the create user, and the create user API was then sending us back an error that there was a duplicate request. There was a duplicate user that already existed with that particular user ID or user email. So how do we go about it? So we actually looked at the Auth0 platform as well in terms of the attributes that it maintains here, right, for the user. Every time the user logs in, the logins count is updated. And now the question is, we have to essentially get this logins count injected into the access token, the ID token that gets sent to us every time a user logs in. And how do we go about this? So there's a way about it. Auth0 platform has something like Auth pipeline here. And inside that we have some rules which we can define to execute post a successful login. And essentially they have given an interesting information about how this can work actually. Essentially there's a lot of documentation there as well. So let's go ahead and create this rule, and this will be, and whenever it's enabled, it will be executed in order shown below for all users and the clients. Okay, in the final step of the authentication process, every time the authentication is successful, this one will be executed. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and say create. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to essentially start with an empty row. I don't want anything of, I think there are some templates here which I will not be using. I'll just go ahead and start with an empty row. And I'm going to go ahead and actually cut and paste some code here and then try to explain that as best as I can in terms of what it's trying to do there. So I'm going to paste some code in here. So essentially this is going to be a function which is going to get a user object who is logged in, and there is some context object, and then there is a callback which will call back the next function in the pipeline before the user gets redirected to the actual application. So I'm going to go ahead and essentially erase this existing dummy function and copy the function here, and this one is going to be called add login counts. Okay, and let me also give some name here. I'm going to say set from login counts. Yeah. Alright. So in here, I'm going to get rid of this to-do stuff. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to define a new namespace, and that's going to be called food app / claims, and I'll probably say Indie Cafe here instead of the food app. Indie Cafe. Yeah. Indie Cafe / claims. Okay. And I'm going to, from the context, I'm going to get the ID token, or otherwise I'm going to set this to a blank object in case I don't have one. And generally you would get an ID token at this point in time. From the context, I'm also going to get the stats. Remember, we actually saw that here. I wish I could go back here and then show that to you, but this was actually present in the context.stats. So I'm going to set that count to the ID tokens and with this particular namespace, and with logins as the attribute name. And then finally, I'm going to set the ID token claims to the ID token object or attribute of the context object, and then call back, essentially call the callback, which is provided here, and that'll go to the next step in the execution process. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and save and try, and hopefully that should give us something in return. Alright, there we go. So essentially this is the user right now. This is the dummy user that is created, and this is the context, right? So I think it should have some login count here, hopefully. Yeah, there is a login count, stats login count. Yeah. And there is the access token and the ID token. Alright. And what is the output now? So the output, click try to view the output. Okay. Alright, so here is our ID token. Okay, the profile is this, identities, and this is the context. Okay, where we have the logins count set to 5. And finally, where is our profile? So the profile should have the logins count, right? Okay, I think it is injecting that here, right? Yeah, that's the one. This is the one, yeah. ID token, and then it's setting that to 5 with our claim name here. Alright, okay, so let's go ahead and cancel this, and we have saved the changes. I think we already did save and try, so it got saved. And the next time we log in, we should get this stuff in here, and we should be ready to accept that. So let's head over back to our Idempotency code base, and inside of here I want to do a couple of changes. That is, instead of calling it init, I'm going to say create user handler. I'm just going to essentially give a different name here. I'm going to say create user handler. Yeah, that's much better in my opinion. And I'm going to go ahead and say here create user handler. Alright, so inside of here I want to check if the user is authenticated. I want to essentially get the logins count. So how do I go about that? If user is authenticated, I'm going to get the logins count. So I'm going to define a new variable here called login count. Okay, and this is equal to, I'm going to do a parse int because all the data will be in string. So I'm going to say parse int, and I'm going to be parsing the user object, and I would be accessing the claims, right? So right now the claims URI that we specified here is actually, I think this one, namespace, right? We need to essentially define that in our system. So what I'm going to do here is essentially copy this thing, alright, and I'm going to go over back to my editor in here, and I'm going to go to, I think what I'm going to do here though is I'm just going to hard code it for now, because if I go through the env route, I'll have to essentially reboot this stuff. So we'll avoid that and then come back and then revisit this again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hard code this bit. I'm going to say user, and I'm going to essentially use the backticks here, and that's going to be this particular thing. And from here I'm going to be accessing the logins. I hope that was logins here, just to be sure. Okay, let's check that once. It was indeed logins. Super. So let's go ahead and parse this out, and then once we get this, we'll say if login count is less than or equal to 1, then we'll go ahead and create this user. So I'll say right here, if login count is less than or equal to 1, then we want to go ahead and create the user. Otherwise we don't want to create the user, right? Alright, super. So I think that's all that we need for this to work. So every time the user logs in, we get the login count and check if it's less than or equal to 1, and then if that is the case, we go ahead and create the user. So we'll also give an else statement here just to make sure, we're not creating the user. Or we can just say user already exists, user already present in our system, okay, super. Alright, and let's see what we can do here. I'll go back over to my browser, and I'm gonna say, yeah, it's already working right now. See, look here, it's already present in our system, and it's not essentially making any calls to our database. So let's see, if I go over back to my network tab, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to sign out and sign back in, just to make sure things are working cleanly and without any glitches, right? Let me go ahead and clear this, clear the console as well. Go ahead and log in one more time, continue, and I should be seeing that message here. Yeah, user is already present in our system, and it's not gonna go ahead and make that call again, right? If I go to the network here, I shouldn't be seeing any calls to the API. Alright, super. So we have got this covered now, alright? And the next thing we want to do though is we want to essentially put this in our environment variable and just as a standard process, right? So I'm going to copy this in here. Okay, go to my .env file, and I'm going to define a new variable called React app Auth0 underscore claims URI, okay, and that's going to be equal to this particular string. Okay, super. And I also need to make sure I make this change here over in config.js, and I'm going to say const claims underscore URI is equal to process.env. Super. Oops. Claims URI. Okay. And then we will also have this if statement here saying that if it's not defined, then we have a problem. Okay. Let me copy this and paste it in here. I'll just say go ahead and define this before we start using that variable. Okay. Alright, and let's go ahead and export this. Super. So we're in good shape here. Alright. And over in app.js, I'm going to import this part, and right here after this call, I'm going to say import claims URI. That's going to be coming from the config. One level above. Okay, actually, is it in the same folder? Actually, yeah, I think it was. So go head over to config and then import config.js. Okay, super. So next, what we're going to do here though is essentially I will have to replace this. Okay, I'm going to say Control X and I'm going to say $, and inside of flower braces and say claims URI. I think this should be good. Okay, and in case it's not coming, I'll just go ahead and set it to 0. Okay, all right. Super. So I think we covered right now. Let's go ahead and test it one more time to make sure our changes didn't break anything. Go ahead and sign out. Oops, it's not. Alright, so which means we have to restart this stuff. Okay, every time we make a change to the .env file, it needs requires a restart. Go ahead and kill this process. Do an npm start, and we'll wait for that to come up. Alright, so this is back up again. I'll go ahead and sign in again. Okay, I'll make sure I have the inspection tabs on. Continue console. Yep, the user is already in the system, and we have like 28 logins already. This is coming as part of our access token. No, it's the ID token. It's the ID token that's carrying this particular logins count here. Okay, super. You can also see it here in case you would wish to. For example, let's say this is in the token endpoint, and yeah, this is the one. Let me go ahead and copy this, and we should be having the logins count here somewhere. Yeah, there it is, the first entry. Okay, super. So we have made some good progress here. We're able to successfully create the user on first login, and subsequent logins, we don't necessarily create the user on our system. That's nice. And the next thing we want to do though is make sure our APIs are protected, right? So right now, if I go into my API code base, okay, so anybody can essentially create the user here, and that's not a good thing, right? So it needs to be protected in some way or shape or form. That's something that we need to look at in the next section. For now, we'll take a quick pause and come back and work on the implementation of securing this particular API.